The ground shakes, not from an earthquake, from the thunder of 100,000 Persians marching to erase the last Greek defensive line. A god king's army sent to wipe Greece from the map. Facing them, a thin red line of 10,000 Spartans. The rest of the Greek force is miles away, scattered in retreat. This isn't a battle, it's an execution. Thermopylae repeating itself in open field. Except now, there's no narrow pass, no rock walls guarding the flanks. Just a wide plain. And Persian commander Mardonius knows it. He chose this ground. He is savoring Sparta's annihilation, about to avenge his king's only naval defeat. How did it come to this? How, 1 year after 300 men shook the greatest empire the world had ever seen, does the fate of Western civilization rest once again in Spartan hands? To understand this impending massacre, we must return to the smell of ash. 1 year had passed since 300 Spartans under King Leonidas were annihilated at Thermopylae, a suicidal stand against an army so vast they said it darkened the sun with its arrows. A glorious death, yes, still a defeat. Xerxes marched south and burned Athens to the ground. The Acropolis, Greece's greatest pride, reduced to rubble. And in every city, every terrified household, the same question echoed. What was the point of Leonidas's sacrifice? What did the blood of the 300 buy? We think we know this story. The legend of the 300 has been told 1,000 times. But that's only the prologue to a far darker, far tenser chapter. The real story isn't how 300 men died. It's how 10,000 Spartans avenged that death and saved the Western world. Yet this vengeance nearly never happened. While Athens burned, Sparta was building a wall, a literal wall, across the isthmus of Corinth, sealing themselves inside the Peloponnese, debating whether saving the rest of Greece was worth the blood of their own sons. The logic was cold. Let the Persians drown trying to cross the sea to reach them. The man holding civilization's fate was no heroic king like Leonidas. He was a regent, a man living in a dead king's shadow. His name was Pausanias, nephew of Leonidas, commander-in-chief of the Spartan army. And he was paralyzed. March north and risk every Spartan in open field against an enemy outnumbering them 5-1, or secure Sparta and let the world burn. On the other side stood Mardonius, cunning, arrogant, relentless. Xerxes had left him 300,000 elite soldiers and one order: crush Greek resistance. Mardonius played manipulation like a lethal instrument. He saw the Greek divisions, saw Spartan hesitation, and sent his messengers not to Sparta, but to the ruins of Athens. His offer was seductive. Abandon those cowardly Spartans. Join me. I'll spare your lives, rebuild your city with Persian gold. Imagine the Athenian position. Their city smoking rubble, their families refugees on distant islands, their Spartan allies hiding behind a wall. The temptation to accept was immense. The Athenian answer changed history. They didn't reply to Mardonius. They sent an ultimatum to Sparta: march north now, or we accept his offer. Not from treachery, but survival. And when we do, our ships and armies march under his banner. Together, we come for Sparta and erase it from the earth. Suddenly, Pausanias wasn't just facing a foreign invasion. He was staring down civil war. Legend says, a desperate Athenian delegate stood before the Spartan elders and roared, "The wall you're building, is it to keep the Persians out or to hide your shame? Leonidas died so you could live as cowards?" That night, the decision was made. No public speeches, no heroic proclamations. In silence, while the Athenian envoys slept without an answer, Pausanias was already moving. By morning, when the Athenians came for one final protest, a Spartan official told them calmly, "Our men are already on their way, several miles from here by now, marching toward Mardonius." The deadliest war machine of the ancient world was in motion. 10,000 Spartan hoplites advanced toward a plain near a small town called Plataea, not only to save Athens, to avenge Leonidas. Mardonius heard of the Spartan advance and smiled. He chose his ground with surgical precision. Spartans were masters of close combat in hills and tight passes, so he chose the opposite, the wide Plataean plain in Boeotia, a perfect killing field for his greatest weapon, cavalry. He built a massive fortified camp on the banks of the Asopus River, then deployed his army. 300,000 souls, Persians, Medes, Bactrians, Indians, and Greeks from Thebes, who had decided Persian victory was inevitable. When Pausanias arrived, his blood ran cold. Across the river stretched a sea of tents, an ocean of men, outnumbering his force 3-1. The trap was obvious. Ordering hoplites across the river to charge meant giving cavalry open ground. A massacre. Thermopylae 100 times larger. So he did the only rational thing. He waited, positioning his men on the hillslopes bordering the plain just beyond cavalry range. The most tense standoff in antiquity began. Two massive armies, kilometers apart, staring each other down. Days passed. Greek soldiers watched their supplies dwindle in the baking heat, and every day the Persian cavalry waited across the river. Mardonius wasn't idle. He sent his finest cavalry commander, Mardonius, a legendary figure on a Nicaean stallion with golden bridles, to ride the edge of the Greek lines day after day, loosing arrows and hurling insults. There they are, the brave Spartans hiding in the hills like frightened goats. Where is your dead king now? Pausanias held his men back. One false step, one unit breaking ranks to chase the riders, would be annihilated. On the 8th day, Mardonius ordered a real attack, not against the fortified Spartans, but against the Athenians on the more exposed lower ground. Thousands of riders crashed through shields. Horses broke the line. Mounted archers fired in volleys. The Athenians were being butchered, with no way to strike back. The line was about to break, and if it broke, the entire Greek army would collapse. Leonidas's vengeance would die in a cavalry skirmish before the real battle had even begun. A desperate runner reached Pausanias. "We're broken. Send help, or we're finished." He watched from his position. He couldn't commit his main force. That would open the entire plain to Mardonius. Then, a small Megarian contingent, just 300 men, not by order but by instinct, charged downhill into the chaos, screaming their war cries. Persian cavalry wheeled to face them. A stray arrow found Mardonius's warhorse. The animal reared and threw its rider. His golden scale armor was nearly impenetrable, but impossibly heavy. Before he could rise, Greek hoplites swarmed and stabbed at his joints. Finally, a spear drove through the visor straight into his eye. The great Mecistius was dead. Fury overwhelmed Persian discipline. They stopped attacking the Greeks and fought each other for the body. A savage brawl of daggers and bare hands through bloody mud. The hoplites finally walled the corpse with shields and carried it uphill. That night, the Greeks paraded it before every rank. Men cheered and clashed spears on shields. First blood, small but enormous in its effect. They had killed one of Mardonius's best. In the Persian camp, the cries of mourning for Mecistius echoed across the plain. Mardonius shifted strategy. He stopped attacking the front and sent cavalry in wide sweeps to intercept the Greek supply lines. Grain wagons burned, convoys massacred. Then he targeted the one thing the army couldn't survive without: the Gargathian spring, the only freshwater source for 100,000 Greek soldiers. Mounted archers galloped to it continuously, firing at anyone trying to fill a water skin. Every trip became a suicide mission. Greek soldiers were dying of thirst in sight of a river. Pausanias was in a death trap. Couldn't stay, couldn't attack, couldn't retreat. Mardonius had sealed the exits. Thirst and starvation would destroy the army before a single sword was raised. On the 12th night, commanders gathered in Pausanias' tent. Torchlight on gaunt, desperate faces. The smell of defeat was palpable. "We cannot stay," he said, his voice ragged, "and we cannot attack. We withdraw." For a Spartan, the word was poison, but the plan was made. Move 100,000 men in pitch darkness to a position called the Island near Plataea, protected by 2 rivers, water and a chance to regroup if they survived the night. At midnight, the coalition disintegrated. The Corinthians panicked and fled too fast, vanishing into darkness without waiting for anyone. The Athenians refused to move until sure the Spartans were moving. And in the Spartan camp itself, Captain Amorphoratus planted himself before Pausanias, face rigid with fury. "Spartan law forbids retreat," he said. "We stay and die. We do not run like dogs." He reached down, picked up a stone, and dropped it at Pausanias' feet. "That is my vote." Time was gone. Dawn was close. Pausanias snapped. "Let him stay. We march. If he has honor, he will follow." The Spartan phalanx began withdrawing, leaving one of its own captains alone against 300,000 enemies. At dawn, Persian scouts looked toward the hills and saw nothing. Empty. The Greeks were gone. The news blazed to Mardonius' tent. He emerged and saw not a disciplined army in retreat, but scattered groups of men in disorder. He saw the Athenians confused on one flank, the Spartans slowly crossing the plain, and Amorphoratus' unit finally running to catch the main body. Mardonius laughed. "Cowards! Look at them! The Spartans, running!" He saw panic, not tactics. The same arrogance that had killed Mecistius now consumed him entirely. "They've starved for days. They're dying of thirst. No strategy needed. Just catch them." He mounted his white warhorse, drew his scimitar. "Attack, full force, no mercy. Today is Greece's last day." The 10,000 immortals surged first. Behind them, the cavalry. Behind them, the roar of 300,000 men flooding across the Occupies in a black wave aimed straight at the retreating Spartans. Pausanias turned, and his blood froze. "Form up! Close ranks!" The Spartans tried to wheel and plant their shields. Too late. The first wave wasn't spears. It was arrows. Thousands of Persian mounted archers swept in perfect circles, releasing black clouds of death. Men fell with arrows through their throats, their legs, the gaps in their armor. Nothing the Spartans could do, being bled to death at range, exactly as Mardonius had planned. Then the infantry closed in. The immortals reached arrow range and loosed their own volleys. The air darkened. Pausanias sought help. A scout shouted back, "Athenians are engaged, my lord. Thebans have intercepted them." The Theban Greeks fighting for Persia had split the coalition in two. No one was coming. The Spartans were alone. Persian infantry at 100 meters, 50, close enough to see their faces, and the Spartans still did not move. Amid the rain of arrows and the dying, Pausanias ordered a halt and turned to the army priest. Spartan law was absolute. No battle without favorable omens. The priest slit a sheep's throat on the blood-soaked ground and read the entrails while men fell dead around him. Unfavorable. An arrow slammed Pausanias' shield hard enough to nearly break his arm. Sacrifice another. A second animal killed. The Persians were 30 meters away, lowering their short spears. Unfavorable, the priest cried again. Spartan captains stared at Pausanias. Their men were being slaughtered without striking a single blow. The first immortals crashed into Spartan shields. The battle had begun, and the Spartans still had no permission to fight. They could only absorb and die. Pausanias stopped looking at the priest. He raised his arms toward where he believed Hera's temple stood and screamed, "Gods, do not abandon us now! Do not let Greece die here!" At that exact moment, after a third sacrifice, the priest looked up. The omens are favorable. It was like a lightning strike. Pausanias lowered his arms. His face was no longer that of a politician or general. It was a mask of pure fury. He turned to his men, who had been waiting for the command while they died, and spoke one word: Sparta. Not an order, an explosion. The Phalanx, the most perfect killing machine ever conceived, finally activated. They lowered their spears, and the shield wall that had been retreating and absorbing suddenly moved forward as a single living organism. The release of a year's worth of humiliation, suppressed rage and shame over a dead king in a mountain pass. The advance of a glacier made of bronze and steel. The Persian immortals, stopped at Thermopylae only by terrain, now faced the Spartan phalanx in open field. For one suspended moment, the universe paused. Then they collided. The sound was a dull, crushing thunder. Thousands of bronze shields driving into wicker. The wicker shattered. The Persians were armed for a different war. Their light shields disintegrated. Their quilted linen armor was useless against Spartan spears nearly 3 meters long. Rear ranks thrusting through gaps into bodies the front ranks had already opened. A Persian couldn't touch a Spartan before being pierced 2, 3 times. It wasn't battle. It became a grinder. The first Persian rank impaled. The second, stumbling over the first's corpses, impaled. Mardonius's vast numbers, his greatest asset, became his worst nightmare. Rear ranks, unable to see the horror ahead, pushed their own comrades into the machine. The Spartans didn't shout. Only the rhythmic work of death. Step, shield, thrust, recover, repeat. Mardonius watched from his white horse as horror replaced arrogance. If that bronze line kept advancing, the demoralized army behind it would break. He had to destroy the Phalanx himself. He turned to his personal guard, 1,000 of the empire's finest riders. "With me! For the king!" He drew his scimitar and spurred his horse straight into the center of the Spartan line. The charge was apocalyptic. For a moment, the Spartan line buckled, spears snapped, men went down under hooves. Mardonius was a storm in the battle center, his horse rearing, scimitar flashing, shattering helmets. He was searching for Pausanias, believing killing the commander would win the war. Then a Spartan named Arimnestos, a man history nearly forgot, saw the giant on the white horse. No spear long enough, being pushed back. He watched Mardonius raise his sword over another brother. Arimnestos didn't think. He crouched in the chaos, grabbed the thing that had defined this land for a year, a rock, and hurled it with everything he had. It struck Mardonius square in the head. The general swayed. His sword fell. He sat motionless in the saddle for one heartbeat, eyes fixed on nothing. Then the conqueror of Athens slid from his horse and crumpled into the mud of Plataea. 1 second of silence. And then the entire Persian army saw the riderless white horse. Panic has a sound, a collective gasp that becomes a roar. For 300,000 men, it was the sound of everything breaking at once. The immortals stopped mid-fight, saw the fallen body, felt fear for the first time in their lives. One turned and ran, then 2, then 100. In under 30 seconds, the most feared fighting force in the Persian Empire broke, and that single act became the death sentence for the entire army. Men trampled men, infantry crushed by their own terrified cavalry. 300,000 soldiers collapsed into themselves. Pausanias watched the enemy line evaporate, and the iron discipline that had held his men while they died found a new purpose. Not defense, extermination. The shield wall dissolved. 10,000 Spartans drew their cyphus, short swords designed for chaos, and were unleashed. And on every stride they shouted one name: Leonidas, Leonidas. The plain of Plataea became an open slaughterhouse. The Asopus River, crossed so confidently that morning, became a deadly barrier. Thousands drowned, pushed into the water from behind, and stabbed by arriving Spartans. The river ran red. Most survivors ran to the one place that felt safe, Mardonius's great wooden stockade. The gates slammed shut on perhaps 200,000 terrified men. Persian archers resumed firing from the battlements. Vengeance had stopped at a wooden wall. Then from the left flank came cheering. The Athenians, who had fought their own brutal battle against the Theban traitors, arrived covered in blood. And the Athenians, unlike the Spartans, were also sailors, builders, engineers. An Athenian captain looked at the wooden wall, saw Spartans uselessly beating it, and smiled. "Bring the axes." The rhythmic thudding of wood on wood began. Archers fired frantically from above. For every Athenian who fell, another took the axe and kept swinging. The wood groaned. The hinges shrieked. The Spartans formed up silently behind, short swords drawn, faces expressionless. Not rage, surgical focus. Then, with a crack that split the sky, the gate gave way. A heartbeat of silence. Wood dust in the air. Inside, a sea of pale, paralyzed faces. Pausanias didn't give an order. He raised his sword. The first Spartan threw was Arinestos. His Cephas found flesh, and hell swallowed the camp. Herodotus would later write that of the 300,000 men Mardonius commanded, only the 40,000 who fled early with General Artabazus and barely 3,000 others survived that day. Hundreds of thousands destroyed. When darkness fell, the screaming stopped. A silence heavier than iron settled over Plataea. The Spartans emerged, coated head to toe in a crimson-black varnish of blood and mud, arms exhausted from killing. Pausanias gave one final order. Find Mardonius's body. They stripped his armor, his jeweled scimitar. An advisor approached. "My lord, Xerxes desecrated Leonidas's body at Thermopylae, cut off his head and put it on a stake. Justice demands the same." It was fair. Everyone expected it. Pausanias looked at the broken body for a long moment. Then at his men. "No," he said quietly. "That is the behavior of barbarians, not Spartans." Mardonius was buried with full military honors, as befitted a brave enemy commander. Because vengeance was not a head on a stake. Vengeance was the silence in the camp. The Red River, the freedom of Greece, purchased that day forever. When news of Plataea reached Ionia across the Aegean, the enslaved Greek cities rose in revolt. Xerxes' empire had not merely lost an army, it had lost its aura of invincibility. It all began with 300 men who chose to die in a mountain pass. But it didn't end there. It ended here, on the muddy plain, where 10,000 blood-soaked Spartans decided that the finest vengeance was not barbarism. It was total victory.